have another twist in the Nolan Wells death mystery we want to talk about. His friends, who have come under a cloud of suspicion and rumors and are lawyering up, possibly about to take legal action, they have visited the barrier island near where Nolan's body washed ashore. Why? What does this mean for the investigation? What does this mean for the search for the truth? Let's talk about it. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber.
They went back to the island, the same island where their best friend disappeared, and they brought their lawyers with them. You already know what that looks like. You knew it the second you heard it, didn't you? Because when innocent people go back to the last place they saw someone alive, they go quietly, alone, maybe with a priest or a parent. They don't go with attorneys. Not usually. Not unless something needs to be managed. Nolan Wells was 18, a college football player, the kind of kid coaches call the heart of the locker room.
We have an update on the Nolan Wells case that we want to talk about. Friends of this deceased 18-year-old college football player reportedly visited Horn Island at the end of last week, on Friday. Remember, Nolan's body washed ashore near this barrier island on July 6th after a boating trip over the July 4th weekend with his friends. And this is key. According to TMZ, the young men here, Warren Hudson and Jack Spatalo, took their lawyers, J. Tyler Cox and Edward Andrew Paltzik, to investigate. It seems they may be conducting their own independent investigation after they retain counsel. And this is all in light of reported threats they may have been receiving. There has been online speculation that they were somehow involved in what happened to Nolan. To be clear, there is nothing that we have seen publicly released by authorities to verify that in any way. They deny any allegations. And by the way, the attorneys also represent another one of Nolan's purported friends, Morgan Seymour, too. And the investigation by the Jackson County Sheriff's Office is still reportedly underway. And even though sources reportedly say that the official autopsy has been completed, those results haven't been released. It's reported that this case will be presented to a grand jury for potential criminal charges, which is our understanding to be procedure under Mississippi law. But after that grand jury is when we may see the results of this autopsy.
On July 4th weekend, he went out on a boat with friends near Ocean Springs, Mississippi. Days later, his body washed ashore on a barrier island called Horn Island. And ever since, 3 young men who were on that boat, Warren Hudson, Jack Spatalo, and Morgan Seymour, have been at the center of a storm they say they didn't create. Here's the thing, though. Storms don't build themselves out of nothing. Last Friday, Hudson and Spatalo went back to Horn Island. They brought 2 attorneys with them, J. Tyler Cox and Edward Haltick. According to reports, it got emotional. Cox said they had to stop a few times, give the guys space, because this was the last place they saw Nolan alive. He called Nolan a brother to them. Said they haven't even had the chance to properly grieve. Maybe that's true. Grief is real, and it doesn't always look clean. But here's where it gets interesting. They didn't go back to grieve quietly. They went to look at something specific. A part of the island Cox called the washing machine. A place where the tides create a whirlpool effect, murky water, conditions that Pollock reportedly said matched the weekend Nolan disappeared. Non-swimmable conditions, in his words.
So according to TMZ, Attorney Cox said things got very emotional when these guys went back to Horn Island. Cox reportedly said the trip was tough for Warren and Jax because that's the last place they saw their best friend. A couple of times we had to pause and give them their space. He emphasized that Nolan was like a brother to them, that Nolan loved them, that they haven't even had an opportunity to properly grieve. Cox said that they wanted to show Attorney Paltzik what's referred to as the washing machine. This is reportedly a part of the island where the tides create this kind of whirlpool effect. Paltzik reportedly confirmed those were the same conditions as when Nolan disappeared and was later found dead. And this is namely, in his opinion, murky water, non-swimmable conditions. To be clear, we don't know if that had a factor in Nolan's death. And not only do we not know the results of the official autopsy, but the independent autopsy, right? The one that was commissioned by Nolan's family, who are conducting their own independent investigation through their attorney, Ben Crump, listed the cause and manner of death as undetermined. Now, that's partially, it seems to be, because Nolan's body, the one that was received by this private pathologist, it was missing components.
Now stop and think about that for a second. Why would you need to physically stand in a spot to confirm a whirlpool exists? You already know the tides. You were there. Unless you're not remembering. Or unless you're building a story, and you need it to hold up when someone finally asks you to walk it, step by step, out loud, in front of a jury.
Or did they hurt him? Did they negligently leave him behind? Whatever, is going through their minds right now, the family of Nolan's minds, I completely understand why. Whether these kids did anything wrong or not, I certainly understand why they would feel that way.
Why visit the island with their lawyers? What are they hoping to learn by visiting the island?
So I can kind of understand why they'd go back. There's a big difference between remembering a location and then physically standing at that location, right? So distances look different. The sight lines look different. Everything looks different. And so we talk about memory recall. One of the things that I teach is memory recall. And I teach, especially when it comes to victims and witnesses, to concentrate on the five senses. And one of the reasons why I do that is, for example, Jesse, if you heard a song that you haven't heard in like 10, 15, 20 years, that song would bring you back to a time almost instantaneously. And what's remarkable about that is you may start to remember memories that you may have otherwise forgotten about. Everybody does that, whether it comes to a song that you've heard, something you've heard, maybe a smell, touching, feeling, tasting, things of that nature. So we concentrate on the five senses when it comes to witnesses. And so I don't know why these kids went back, why their attorneys wanted them to go back. I have no idea, but I could surmise that everything looks different. It's easier to say one thing, but when you're there and you can feel it and you can smell it and you're around it, you start to remember things that maybe everything looks different. And so I really think it could really help with memory recall. In fact, if I'm conducting the investigation and the witnesses were willing to, the kids were willing to go back with me, that's something that I would have suggested. Hey, let's go back to the island and let's talk about what we're seeing here. So I don't know specifically why they went back, but I could surmise in the types of investigations I've done why I would want to do that.
It would also be whether you're an investigator or a lawyer.
And look, I need you to stay with me here, because this is the part nobody's really talking about. The official autopsy was completed. The results haven't been released. Not to the public. Not yet. Meanwhile, the family commissioned their own independent autopsy, and the private pathologist who examined Nolan's body found something strange. Parts of his throat were missing, reportedly because the state was running further testing on that exact area. The independent report ultimately listed the cause and manner of death as undetermined. Undetermined. Sit with that word for a second. Not accident. Not homicide. Undetermined. Because something about that throat needed more looking at than the rest of him. According to a Department of Marine Resources report, the friend's story is that Nolan chose to stay behind on the island to talk to a young woman nobody's identified. That's the official account. That's what got written down. But Nolan's own family says that story doesn't fit the person they knew. One of his friends, Javon Williams, told CNN something that stuck with me since I first read it. He said Nolan was never the guy who stayed behind. If he rode with you, he came back with you. Every single time. That's not a small detail. That's a pattern. And patterns are the one thing a fabricated story can never quite fake.
Seemingly because the state ME, right, was conducting further testing. But if you recall, the narrative that we've heard is that the last time the friends saw Nolan was when he left their boat to stay on Horn Island, allegedly to talk to a young woman. According to a Department of Marine Resources report, friends who were with Nolan said, quote, when they left, he was in the company of an unknown female and that he chose to remain on the island. However, Nolan's family said this doesn't make sense, that Nolan wouldn't go out on his own. Even one of Wells' friends, Javon Williams, told CNN, I've never known Nolan to stay back while his friends leave. He's always been a guy where if he rode with you, he's going to come back with you. That's always how he's been every single time. In a statement to People on August 9th.
Now here's where I want to pause for a second, just between us. I've covered a lot of cases. A lot of grieving families standing in front of cameras, begging strangers for answers their own government won't give them. And there's a specific kind of exhaustion on their faces. Not anger, not yet. Just this quiet disbelief that the truth is sitting somewhere in a file, and nobody with power seems to be in a hurry to hand it over. I don't know what happened to Nolan Wells. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I do. But I know what it looks like when a family is being managed instead of helped. And that look on the Wells family right now, it's familiar. It's the same look we've seen 100 times before, in 100 cases, where the people with the most to lose end up waiting the longest for the least. The Friends' attorneys, meanwhile, aren't just defending. They're going on offense. Pollock announced plans to file lawsuits, damn near immediately, against two unidentified individuals they claim have defamed their clients online.
According to the Herald, Attorney Polczyk announced that he and Attorney Cox are planning on filing lawsuits against two currently unidentified individuals, that the suits would be drafted, quote, damn near immediately, adding that they, quote, have been working tirelessly to identify the specific offenders who have, as a matter of law, defamed Warren, Jax, and Morgan.
In a joint statement, the attorneys called their three clients completely innocent young men, haunted to their cores by Nolan's death, and accused what they called hordes of hustlers, opportunists, and vultures of descending on Ocean Springs to profit off the tragedy.
Attorneys Polczyk and Cox said in part that their three clients, quote, are completely innocent young men. Each of them love Nolan Wells as a brother, and each are haunted to the cores of their souls by Nolan's tragic death. Magnifying the tragedy, hordes of hustlers, opportunists, and vultures have descended upon the beautiful community of Ocean Springs, Mississippi. Their aim is to divide a town, fuel political agendas, and profit from this tragedy. We, on the other hand, only deal in evidence, facts, and reality. We will never defame, guess, or speculate. And here is the truth. We don't know how Nolan Wells died. But what we do know, beyond any doubt, is this. Warren, Jax, and Morgan had nothing whatsoever to do with Nolan's death. To all those who have defamed these good Ocean Springs people, we recommend in the strongest possible terms that you immediately apologize and retract your lies. Otherwise, we will see you in court faster than you could say rush to judgment.
That's a strong statement. A very strong statement for men who, by their own attorney's account, have nothing to hide. And a GoFundMe legal defense fund set up on their behalf has now raised over $160,000. The fundraiser page says the young men have cooperated fully with authorities, turned over everything they had, and provided witnesses accounting for their whereabouts. It also says most of them couldn't even attend Nolan's funeral because of, quote, threats sent by race baiters online.
Oh, and about the Friends, I got to mention this. We reported this last week. There is a Give, Send, Go fundraiser that was set up for them, a legal defense fund, currently has raised now over $166,000. And it says in part, quote, since Nolan's death, Warren Hudson, Jax Patalo, Morgan Seymour, and many others have been inundated with death threats, threats of violence, and defamation. They have been falsely and wrongly blamed by individuals online and in the media of either directly or indirectly having a hand in Nolan's death. Most of them could not even attend their own best friend's funeral. Why? Because race baiters sent a deranged army after them online in the name of justice. Since the beginning of the investigation, these young men have cooperated with authorities, turned over all the information they had, and provided an overwhelming number of witnesses accounting for their whereabouts. Some of them even reported to speaking up publicly to defend themselves against baseless allegations. But unfortunately, it has become clear that the truth doesn't matter. Our first goal is to raise money to defend these friends against incoming wrongful death actions filed by attorney Ben Crump and his team. Our second goal is to fund a robust legal team to sue for the litany of slander and libel being spread by not only Crump, but also many social media influencers, news outlets, and local provocateurs who know better. This is not about silencing legitimate discussion or respectful disagreement. People are free to ask questions and express opinions. This is about drawing a line against defamation, targeted harassment, threats of violence, doxing, intimidation, and coordinated campaigns that destroy lives before the facts are known. Your donation says that enough is enough. Your donation says that the time of exploiting a tragedy under the guise of justice and leaving a community in ruins after squeezing as much money out of it as possible is over. Nolan deserved dignity, not this. Oh, and by the way, TMZ caught up with Ben Crump when he was in New York City to get his thoughts of these young men lawyering up. He claimed all of that is a, quote, distraction, and said they are.
We all knew this case was going to get ugly the moment money and lawyers entered the picture. You knew it. I knew it. Because that's what always happens once a tragedy becomes a liability. Ben Crump, the attorney representing Nolan's family, was asked about the friends lawyering up. He called it a distraction. Said his team is focused only on the truth of what happened to Nolan Wells. Simple words. But words are cheap when three separate investigations are now running at the same time. The sheriff's office, the family's independent team, and now the friend's own inquiry. each one collecting its own version of events, each one with its own incentive to shape what the truth ends up looking like.
And you said investigation. There are now three, right? So there's the official investigation by the sheriff's office. There is the independent investigation being commissioned by the family. And now there's this other investigation that's being commissioned by the friends and their attorneys. And now I'm starting to think, how does one affect the other? And what happens if there's inconsistencies in what is found in each investigation?
So, I don't think, and again, let me preface this by saying the law enforcement's job is to look at it with an unbiased lens. They've got to walk in there and of course they're going to have theories, but they have to test their theories. But law enforcement, if they're doing their job correctly, they're going to look at everything extremely unbiased, right? Walk in there and just say, okay, we've got to be objective when looking at that. Unfortunately, the attorneys for each prospective parties are not going to be as unbiased as law enforcement is supposed to be. They're always going to represent the interest of their clients. And so that's the thing that I think, would it affect the overall investigation? I don't think from the sheriff's department it would.
And that's the part they don't want you to focus on. Because once evidence starts flowing through private attorneys before it ever reaches a courtroom, the truth stops being one thing. It becomes whichever version survives the lawsuits. So here's where we're left. A grand jury hasn't convened yet. The toxicology report is still sealed. The autopsy results are still sitting in a drawer somewhere in Mississippi. And the friends who were the last people to see Nolan Wells alive just walked back into the exact spot he vanished from, with their lawyers standing beside them, studying the tides like witnesses preparing testimony.
It's an interesting situation. You have all these eyeballs on this. There's a ton of spotlight. I've said this before. One thing for Ben Crump, he has brought a spotlight to this, put pressure on law enforcement to do this the right way, for the DA's office to do this the right way. And look, we're waiting right now. I don't know the status of the sheriff's office investigation. I don't know when it's going to be presented to a grand jury. We're kind of in a waiting period here. And I imagine that's a very, very difficult and tense position for law enforcement to have all this attention on them in this way. Is it not?
It is. And the one thing it looks like they're doing things the right way. I always caution when I teach, I always caution my guys, never let the media, never let your administration, never let anybody rush your investigation. Our job is to do a complete and thorough investigation. And this high profile case, I could see where it would cause, it could, if the right investigators and the right administration at that police agency, if they're not doing the right thing. But it seems to me, and again, I've never spoken with anybody down there, so I don't know, but what I'm looking at, it seems they are doing the right thing. They're taking their time. They're not falling to political pressure. They're not falling to the media pressure. And I think that's very, very important. As long as we know as investigators, hey, listen, we're not going to follow these outside influences. We're going to do a complete and thorough investigation. And sure, it's frustrating, but this is our job and this is what we have to do.
And no matter which camp, whichever side you're looking at here in terms of law enforcement or this independent investigation, everybody's trying to find the truth of what happened to Nolan. And look, again, it doesn't discount. The family wants answers. They want their own team. They want to verify whatever the results are of the state investigation, and they have every right to do that. And hopefully this family is going to get the answers one way or another that they deserve. We don't know how long this is going to take, but we're going to stay on top of it. John Rappa, thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Maybe that's innocent. Maybe it's exactly what it looks like on the surface. Grieving young men trying to make sense of the worst day of their lives. Or maybe you already know better. Maybe your gut told you the second you heard lawyers on the island that something isn't adding up here. And it never really does, in cases like this, does it? So I'll leave it with you. If these three young men have nothing to hide, why does every step they've taken since Nolan's death look less like grieving and more like preparing a defense? Tell me what you think happened on that island. Because something tells me we're not done talking about Nolan Wells. Not even close.